Tonight on Joey Browning's College Football Show, it's our national championship preview and prediction between Indiana and Miami. Game takes place on Monday night in Hard Rock Stadium. And here at Joey Browning's College Football Show, I'm going to give you my best insight based on what these two teams have been all year, based on what we've seen from them in the playoff, and based on the film and the analysis of the two teams facing off against each other. I'm Joey Browning. I can't thank you enough for being here tonight, whether you're watching on YouTube, whether you're listening on podcast form, Apple, Spotify. Guys, go ahead, too, on YouTube. Please hit that subscribe button, hit that like button. Also, on our social media, follow us at Joey Browning CFB at both TikTok and Twitter. Put out a ton of content on both of those platforms. Through YouTube, where we're doing film breakdowns. We'll do the shorts. TikTok, obviously, is short form video, and I think the engagement we've had with those short form videos has been great so far. I'm kind of building our following here, and once again, the whole point of that is to, for myself to dig into the film of these teams and see what they're about and see what their scheme is, and then try to engage with our audience through the film and hope that, you're learning as we are and just breaking down this great game of college football. Also, guys, make sure that you have any feedback, any questions, any comments about the show, any ideas for segments in the off season, since we only have one game left in the season. Please do not hesitate to hit us up on those social media accounts. You can email the show at joeybrowningscfb@gmail.com. We'll do mailbag shows. We did a mini mailbag on our last episode where we answered 3 questions. So all that stuff kind of works together and functions for the show to be fully involved and engaged with the audience, with you, the college football fans. So, without further ado, we will get into the breakdown of the national championship game. On Tuesday on our show, we kind of got into early thoughts about the national championship, what the kind of the perception was of Indiana and the perception of Miami coming into this. And, we talked about kind of the trends of the two teams, the styles of play, talked about their coaching backgrounds and the coaching staffs of each team. And, I think as I've gotten further into this and looking at the numbers and using the film as the main source of analysis, I can't help but come to some pretty concrete conclusions for my own opinion on this. Now, once again, I could be completely wrong. I'm sure some of you out there remember my predictions for the semifinals. I only got half of those right? I predicted Indiana to be here, but I also predicted Ole Miss to beat Miami in the Fiesta Bowl. So that did not come true. So take with this information what you will. But I believe this is my best shot at breaking down this game. And so I'm going to go ahead and give it to you in that manner. So to the game. January 19th, Monday night in Hard Rock Stadium in Miami Gardens, Florida. The 10th seeded Miami Hurricanes are an 8.5-point underdog to the 1-seeded Indiana Hoosiers of the Big Ten. Indiana, of course, comes in with a 15-0 record, unbeaten, looking to become really the first 16-0 team of this college football playoff era since the expansion to 12 teams. Miami, of course, has the 2 blemishes on their record, losing to SMU and Louisville, both in conference play in the ACC. So, guys, kind of my early thoughts of this game centered around really once again the styles of play. And I really think when you look at these two teams, they honestly, philosophically, they want to be very similar. And this is, without a doubt, a line of scrimmage game. I feel like if you look at even the teams from the last round, right? Did Indiana beat Oregon? Miami beat Ole Miss? I think there's a distinct difference in the lines of scrimmage of both of these teams and the teams that they dispatched of in the semifinals in Ole Miss and Oregon. There's a distinct difference. I think they're both built through the line of scrimmage. I feel like their coaching philosophies from the head coaches down, they fit that. Okay? Mario Cristobal at Miami, since he got there in the winter of 2021, this has been his vision. Build this team through the offensive and defensive lines, supplement the skill around it, and, win games through the line of scrimmage. I really feel like that's right. And then you look at Indiana and Curt Cignetti. It's obvious that the portal additions that he's brought through Indiana, it fits the mold of on offense. They want these big, massive offensive linemen who can run these zone schemes inside and outside zone. They're basically building a wall, and the running backs are hitting the creases that open up in those walls when they just start leaning on these defensive fronts that they play. And then on the defensive line, obviously they have built a team that they're going to be they're going to stem and move up front. They're going to use their hands well, and they're going to play gap sound. They're going to get after the quarterback. They're going to stop the run. And I really think both teams are built in a similar style if you just look at them. So, looking at Fernando Mendoza, okay, obviously he's a Heisman Trophy winner. I think, he's probably the single player in this game, I would say, that is going to get the most pub and kind of publicity coming into this. Winning the Heisman Trophy. He's projected to be the number one pick in the draft next year. He's going to be the main attraction as far as an individual player in this game. Miami, the strength of their team is their pass rush. Ruben Bain Jr., Akeem Mesidor, those guys on defense that constantly have gotten after the quarterback in these playoffs, pressured the quarterbacks in these playoffs, and truly have led the charge in all three of their games up until this point to get to the national championship game. That is Miami's key strength, I believe, on this team, is their ability to rush the passer without having to blitz. Even though they do blitz a good bit and they bring more than four quite often, I do believe that's their kind of unique skill, is being able to get after the quarterback without having to rush more than four, right? Mendoza's been sacked 16 times this year. In 15 games, he's been sacked 16 times. So that tells me right there that, this Indiana team, they're not going to be beat in a game where they're going to give up 5 sacks. I just don't think they are. I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think their game plan is going to allow for that to happen. I don't think that their style of play, with averaging 41 runs a game versus 25 passes a game, I don't think that's going to allow for a huge sack game to happen for Miami. I don't think Mendoza's legs, his escapability, his movement in the pocket, I don't think that's going to allow for a big sack game for Miami. However, I think with that information, and Miami's coaches obviously have that information from scouting this game, watching film, breaking it down, that they're going to have to affect Mendoza, and sacks are not the be-all, end-all. It's affecting the quarterback. It's getting after him. It's getting him off his platform. It's affecting him with a rush in terms of, limiting his accuracy, or, not allowing him to get to that second or third read in his progression. We're going to talk a little bit tonight about Indiana's pass game and kind of how it's structured, and it's it's overwhelming targets, like as far as on the field, middle of the field, hashes, numbers, whatever. I think Miami has to use those tendencies against Indiana and say, hey, we're going to try to use our pass rush to affect these types of throws that Indiana likes to have. Instead of saying, hey, we're going to tee off, we're going to sack him 6 times, and we're going to win the game because, they're going to get behind the sticks, and sacks are drive killers, really, right? So I don't think that's going to happen. Talking about pressure in Mendoza, okay? So you say, hey, maybe you can send 5, 6 a good bit. You can get after him. Just in the Rose Bowl, Mendoza against 5 or more rushers was 14 of 16 for 192 yards and 2 touchdowns. So anytime Alabama rushed more than 4, 14 for 16, 192, 2 touchdowns. In the last 2 years, so last year at Cal, this year at Indiana, versus 5 or more rushers, Fernando Mendoza has 20 touchdown passes and 0 interceptions. So, if you expect to blitz this guy all night and send pressure, whether it's zone pressure and you're dropping guys out, or whether it's man pressures where you're bringing 5 or 6, you're manning up and playing man free or cover 0 behind it. His MO is to pick that apart. And I really think if you look at Mendoza, if you break him down in terms of how quick he gets rid of the ball, where his eyes are when the ball is snapped or between when the ball is snapped and when he throws it, he's a 1 or 2 read guy. And what I mean by that is he is not getting to a third progression in the pass game 99% of the time. He knows what he sees pre-snap, and what happens at the snap is going to indicate where he goes with the ball. And oftentimes he goes to his first read. Okay? When he doesn't go to that first read, he's going to get to that second read, usually within 2.5 seconds of this ball being snapped. And if that second read is not there, he's unsure, he's pulling that thing down and he's getting out of there. That's one reason he's so effective, right? And the pressures and the blitzes really don't limit him as a passer, because he's not going to sit in there and go through a full 3 or 4, option progression in a pass game. He's going 1 or 2 looks, and then he's pulling that thing down and he's out. But the thing about Mendoza is it's not like he watches the rush and feels the rush and gets out. He's so good at getting it out quick to that first or second read. Most of the time, he doesn't have to worry about scrambling and escaping the rush because he's already got it out. I think if you look at Indiana's downfield pass game, it's heavy outside the numbers. So it's the routes that you're looking at with that. You're looking at fades, back shoulders, which we've broken down on film this week of Indiana, comebacks. So you're running to go, and then as a receiver, you stop, you break your route off, and you break 45 degrees downhill back to the line, towards the line of scrimmage at the sideline. That's a comeback, right? And then just straight go ball fades. That's 90% of Indiana's drop back game. And one thing that does for a quarterback is it helps them get the ball out. They know the ball is going to be dictated a lot of times to that predetermined read that say, hey, whether we get zone or whether we get man-to-man, we're going to take this one-on-one shot. And it doesn't really matter if it gets capped, meaning if the defender takes away the vertical, we can back shoulder it. And they're so good at back shouldering. We've shown you the film of Surratt and Charlie Becker. That, like, those guys are so long and rangy, and Mendoza's so accurate that their back shoulder game is really, really deadly. So I think if you're Miami, you have to try to take that away, right? You limit that. You have to try to force Mendoza off of those looks and force him to read to a second and third progression and try to have to put his eyes to the middle of the field. And I think in order to do that, I think Miami has to disguise. Because one thing about Mendoza, if you play what you show him pre-snap, meaning he can sit there and say, hey, they're cover 3, they're bump and run, they're man free, then he's going to have an answer. He's so good at knowing where the ball should go and processing pre-snap. He's going to have an answer to that. I think Miami they got to show bump and run, and they got to play some cloud cover 2 stuff with a hard corner and a safety over the top. I think they have to play man free and a man free look, and I think they have to play like a trap corner where the corner funnels the number one receiver towards the safety, towards the hash, and plays more of that flat look. I think they have to try to blitz the corner some and show him a rotation in the secondary where you've either got a nickel or an inside backer dropping to the boundary to get under one and a safety over the top to keep it from popping vertical. I think they have to show him all different looks, because if Miami gets in what they like to get in that 8-man front with a strong safety down, with one high safety, and they play bump and run, and they play man free, Mendoza and those receivers are going to beat them more often than not. Miami's corners might win some one-on-ones, but I think Indiana's going to get theirs. And I think they have to limit that part of Indiana's game, right? I think when you look at Miami's defense, can they get pressure with 4? They've done it all year. They've done it all playoff, right? We saw it against Ohio State. And, we've seen it against other teams. We didn't see it so much against Ole Miss, and I think that's a key tell in this game. How quick Ole Miss and Trinidad Chambliss got rid of the ball. They really didn't allow for many pressures. And they were eating, right? Bain and Mesidor, like they were beating their guys. But Ole Miss schemed it up to get the ball out. Chambliss's legs helped him avoid pressure, and they really didn't get to him a ton. So I think if Ole Miss can execute that and keep their quarterback clean, I think Indiana can keep Mendoza clean. So I think Miami's got to be able to pressure him with 4. That way you can play some different games in the back end with some zone looks and some 2-man stuff. Because if Mendoza is able to, once again, if you're going to bring 5 or 6 and he knows it, he's going to have an answer. And you have to pick and choose those spots where you do that. So if you can get pressure with 4, then it really doesn't matter if he knows what you're in, because he's outnumbered back there, right? And he's only going to be able to take what you give him in terms of free access throws underneath, or if you press them and he tries to take vertical shots, right? I think Miami's corners have to play a really good game, like an excellent game. You saw in the Oregon game, you saw Becker and you saw Surratt. They ate those corners up on the back shoulder balls, the go balls, the comebacks, the deep sails or the deep outs. Like they just move the sticks and they constantly go up and down the field and make big plays with that. Can Miami's corners make plays? It's going to be key. I think starting cornerback for Miami, Xavier Lucas, is out for the first half. Remember, he got hit with that targeting call in the second half of the Ole Miss game. That will be a key thing early. Is that going to hurt Miami early? Can Indiana take advantage of that? I think too, when you kind of break down Indiana's offense, the run pass ratio is huge in this game, right? And I think if you look at Miami's front 4, you look at their zone pressures, their 5 and 6 man blitzes, they would love to see a team, like they've seen some in this playoff, that likes to drop back and throw it a ton. right? And you look at their previous 3 opponents, Texas A&M. Texas A&M, of their offensive snaps this year, 46% of those snaps were drop back pass. You look at Ohio State, 47% of theirs were drop back pass. And then you look at Ole Miss, 48% of their plays this year were drop back pass, which all of those are in the bottom half nationally. So the highest of those 3 was Ole Miss. Ole Miss 48% pass. That's 73rd in the country in terms of high percentage of your offensive snaps or drop back pass. Indiana is 39%, 122nd in the nation in terms of dropping back, right? Of calling a drop back pass in proportion to all of your offensive snaps. So, to me, that does not bode well for Miami because Indiana's game is running the football and not allowing you to rush the passer. Because if a team's running the football on you, you can't get out there in that 9 technique and just bull rush the tackle and go get the quarterback because you're opening up rush lanes for the backs. And you have to be more gap sound to play the run and play your gaps. And it slows the game down. And you saw it, right? You've seen it. Ole Miss was able to run the ball when Kewan Lacey was in the game. In the second half of the Ohio State game, Ohio State committed to the run a little bit more, and it slowed that pass rush down. That's got to be a key thing for Indiana in this game, and they know that. It's coming in and keeping that run-pass ratio where it is. Okay? I think if you look at yards per play, okay, I think that's a key metric in a game like this because what are you going to average on first down? Are you going to get in second and medium? Are you going to get in third and manageable? Are you going to convert third downs and move the football? I think that's huge in this game. Indiana is 6.6 yards per play. That's 6th in the country. Miami's 5.8. That's 32nd in the country. That's their offenses, okay? So I think both teams have the ability to move the ball on first down and make second and third down manageable. We've seen Miami go for it on fourth down quite a bit in these playoffs when they get to 4th and 1, 4th and 2. So we know they have that in their back pocket to kind of make up for a little bit lighter yards per play than Indiana has. So, I think that's going to be key. I think if you look at these teams' defensive yards per play, these are 2 of the best defenses in the country. There's no doubt from top to bottom. Indiana allows 4.6 yards per play. That's 11th in the country. Miami allows 4.5. That's 10th in the country. So both of these defenses are very good in getting you in 2nd and 6, 2nd and 7, 2nd and 8, and forcing you into obvious passing situations, making you one-dimensional on 2nd and 3rd down. Third down percentage, okay? Indiana is number 1 in the country in offensive third down conversion percentage. They convert 58% of their third downs. That's number 1 in the nation. And Miami is 47%. That's 18th in the country. So I think Indiana obviously has an edge in converting third downs on offense and have it in yards per play. So to me, that's kind of a tell as well, like that they have a history of being able to consistently move the football with the yards per play and with their third down conversion rate. Now, who's to say in this game that doesn't flip? It could easily flip, right? Nothing you've done these first 15 games has anything to do with this game on Monday night. It's going to be a clean slate, obviously. So, and then I think defensively, Indiana does allow 30% third down conversion rate. That's good for 8th in the country. Miami is 31%. That's good for 11th in the country. So both these teams very good on third down defense, getting off the field. And one of those reasons, they get teams in passing situations, and they can tee off and go get the quarterback. I think rushing defense, okay? Miami is 6th in the country in rushing defense. Indiana is 2nd. Indiana gives up about 2.4 yards per rush to its opponents this year. It's good for 2nd in the country. Obviously, that's a big stat. So I think both these teams obviously are two of the better rushing defenses in the country based on those numbers. And I think you look at how well both teams get off the field on third down is also a telling stat in that they stop the run and they force teams into passing situations in third down. And it's favorable for the defense to be in that situation, and they're able to get off the field. So obviously, who can run the football in this game is going to be huge. I think these numbers that we've talked about here, and I think the film shows too, this is going to be a game that both these teams want to establish a run. They want to be committed to the run. You look at what Indiana's done these last couple of games, right? They go into that Rose Bowl game and they run it against Alabama for what? I mean, they rushed it, I think, 51 times in that game. Like that's a crazy stat. And they only ran like 68 plays in that game, maybe 70, right? You look at what they did against Oregon, right? They ran it 40 times against Oregon, and they only ran 60 offensive plays. So that's 67% of their plays in that game against Oregon. They ran the football. They want to run the football, and they are going to be committed to it. In Miami, I don't think, my own opinion, I don't think Miami is consistently committed to the run as Indiana is. I think a lot of times Miami, and this is not necessarily a stat thing, I think it's you have to watch them thing. Early in games, they'll establish, hey, they're physically dominant, they have the physical edge, they can run the football. And I feel like they kind of play with their food a little bit throughout games. I think they did it against Ole Miss. I think if they handed the football off 70 times against Ole Miss, they probably win that game by 14 or 17 points. I really do. But they let Carson Beck throw it 37 times, and they had to score with less than a minute left to win it. I think Indiana is much more committed to the run normally than Indiana is. But I do think both teams, they want to run the football, and that's how they want to win these games, right? They want to take the onus off their defense by possessing the ball more and running the football and wearing defenses down, right? I think that's just what they want to do. Now, I think if you look at how well these teams run the ball, but that's obviously what they want to do. I think if you look at how well these teams both stop the run, like we just talked about, and you look at their schemes, okay, this is something too we've broken down in our film studies of these two teams. Both these teams are zone scheme teams, all right? They both run inside and outside zone. That's primarily what they do. They run a little bit of gap scheme, but that's their identity is running inside and outside zone. So they're both similar in that regard. Their defenses go against those offenses every day in practice. So you know those defenses, they know how to stop and scheme up stopping these zone runs. So that factored into how well both these teams stop the run in general. I think it's going to be tough for either of these teams to establish much of a run game early. I think both teams are going to be so ready to stop the run in this game, to sell out to stop it. I think early on in this game, you're going to see very little ability to run the ball. That would be my guess, just based on the numbers and based on this matchup and what these two teams do and how they like to run it. And guys, you can defeat zone run game, obviously by out athleting people up front and just whipping them and defeating blocks, you can beat zone. But you can also defeat zone by, if you have a guard and you have a front side tackle and a front side guard running inside zone, and they're working to a double team on a defensive lineman. And then all of a sudden you get a stunt by that defensive line, right? Where, the tackle goes out and the end loops back under. That can screw up zone, okay? Because those linemen are obviously trying to get their count for who they're going to block in the zone run game. I think you can do a little bit of what we saw Oregon try to do, where you're going to get into like a tight front where you're covering the center, you're covering both guards, you're taking away those double teams where you're making those offensive linemen single block defensive linemen. And that frees up linebackers to fit the run. I think both these teams obviously know that there's a multitude of ways to be able to scheme up against zone run game, and they're going to have their best shot at doing that early on. So my guess would be that both these teams are going to struggle to run it early on. And that's why I think whoever can run it obviously is going to have a huge leg up in this game. Who can establish a run? Who can be consistent? Who can be committed to it and stay committed to it? And in that third and fourth quarter, when, you might only have 50 or 60 yards rushing for the game, will you stick with it until the dam breaks and, you end up rushing for 150, 200 yards as a team and winning the game because of it? I think that's going to be a huge factor in this game, obviously, right? I think Miami, their offensive game plan. I love their offensive game plan against Ole Miss. I thought they got in that 11 personnel sniffer set with those condensed formations, and they stayed in it. And I think something similar against Indiana is going to be beneficial for them, right? I think those motions and those condensed formations allow free access. I think you don't want to put a ton on Carson Beck. He's been so good at taking the quick game, taking the free access. Shannon Dawson has formation and motioned and got those guys open quick where he can catch the ball on the snap and get it out quick to a free access throw. I think that's key in this game. Also, those motions and formations, they give them an edge blocking, right? We saw in the film Malachi Toney, and we saw the other receivers from Miami really being involved in the run game and blocking. And they motioned and shifted those guys around. They condensed them where they could go crack those safeties. I think that is key in this game, because if you can get in that 11 personnel look with a sniffer with those condensed formations against Indiana, you saw what they did. I mean, they RPO'd out of it. They play action passed out of it. They ran the football out of it. They dropped back out of it. They did all kinds of stuff against Ole Miss. And then they simply just ran zone, split zone, and zone insert and ISO. And they wore Ole Miss down in that way. I think a game plan very similar to that is what they need against Indiana. So we'll see what they come out, what personnel, what types of formations. I talked about Shannon Dawson on the show the other night, Miami's OC. I think he's done a great job of adapting to what this team needs to do to try to win these games. And I'm very interested to see what his plan is going to be for them to try to win this game and his best deal, right? I think Indiana, I mentioned earlier, they average 41 rushes a game to just 25 passes a game on offense. If they have anything close to that ratio, they're winning this game by 10 or more points. You can go ahead and mark it down. If Fernando Mendoza throws it 22 times and they run it 39 times, they're winning the game. If he throws it 21 times and they run it 42 times, Indiana's winning the game by 10 or more, because that is their identity. Running the football up to 60 to 70% of the time and giving Mendoza one-on-ones and the perfect opportunities to throw the football when the defense is sold out to stop the run. And that's why they've been so effective with, he's thrown 5 incompletions in these 2 games with 8 touchdown passes, because they're so opportunistic and explosive in the pass game with teams selling out to stop the run. Can Miami flip that ratio? Can they, let's say instead of 41 and 25, you get 31 runs and 35 passes? That's 10. They cut 10 off and they added 10. They had to cut 10 runs off and add 10 passes. Can they force Indiana into that type of game? I think that's key for Miami. And obviously, guys, there's a recipe for that, right? It's getting ahead. It's shortening the game. It's making Indiana impatient and saying, hey, we don't have time to run it 40 times. We got to throw it. The game is shortened. We only have so many snaps. And getting them to panic, right? Like we really haven't seen all year. Can they do that? I think you look at kind of the game plan that Penn State employed against them. Mendoza had to throw it 31 times against Penn State. That's something that you want to try to get to, right? And that's obviously the closest Indiana's come to getting beat all year is that game where he had to throw it that many times. Is that something that you can do? In that ratio, it was 31 runs, 31 passes. It was 50-50. That's really the only time this year they've been anything close to that, right? You even look against Ohio State, he only threw it 20 times where they ran it 40 times, okay? I think, actually against Ohio State, he threw it 23 times and they ran it 34 times. So still a very favorable ratio. I think that run-pass ratio, if you look at that middle of the game and Indiana has thrown it more times than they've ran it, that's a good sign for Miami, okay? So can they do that? Ultimately, I think this game is going to come down to there's several factors we've already mentioned. Who can run the football? Which quarterback can be most effective? Which defense can be opportunistic, can get off the field on third down, can hold up against the run. I think who plays a clean game. And we talked about this with the Fiesta Bowl with Miami and Ole Miss last week. Who was going to play a cleaner game? Miami's history says that somewhere in its DNA is a very, very mess around, play with your food, clunker football game. And that is not what you want to do against this Indiana team because they're so mistake-free and they're so opportunistic, right? So you look at Miami in these playoffs, right? In terms of turnovers, they've really only turned it over a couple of times, right? Beck had the pick against Ole Miss, and then they had a fumble at Texas A&M. They really haven't turned it over. They had another turnover, a fumble against Ohio State early, right? They really haven't turned it over a bunch, right? But I think if you look at their history, if you look at what they've done all season long, guys, you can look back at games like Florida State. Yes, they won that game going away, but they had 14 penalties for 134 yards. If you do that Monday night, you lose. Simple as that, right? You look at their game against SMU, right? Against SMU, they had 12 penalties for 96 yards. And they also turned it over 2 times in that game, right? If you do that, you lose against Indiana. There's no doubt. And guys, you can go on down the list, right? Miami's had games this year where they've had 9, 8, 13, 9, 5, 12, 5, 9, and then 10 penalties last week against Ole Miss, right? That's happened to them. Carson Beck's thrown 11 interceptions. He threw 6 in their 2 losses against SMU and Louisville. How clean can Miami be? Because that's the ground floor, right? That's the lowest common, that's the barrier to entry in trying to win this game is that you're clean. Because if you're not, you're losing no matter what, I think. Because you look at Indiana, Indiana on the flip side of their penalties, guys, they average 5 penalties for 23 yards a game. That's it, right? Very, very little penalty yardage a game against Indiana. Indiana's only turned the ball over 8 times all year long. Carson Beck's thrown 11 picks just himself. Okay? Indiana is they are so consistently clean with their operation, with not having penalties, with not turning the ball over. I think that is going to be huge in this game, right? And I know that's cliche to say, hey, don't get penalized, don't turn the ball over, win the turnover battle, you'll win, right? But I think in this game for Miami, that's the barrier to entry. If you cannot be clean in this game when it comes to penalties and turnovers, you're going to lose, right? And for that reason, guys, and that history and kind of the character and the DNA of these two teams, I said it the other night. That's why I like Indiana, right? I think everything about them screams execution, execution, execution. I don't think this moment will be too big for them, and I think Miami is going to give them everything they want. No, don't get me wrong on that. I think it's going to be a slobber knocker of a game. I think it's going to be very tight early, and I think both teams are going to struggle to run the ball early in what they want to do. But I think Miami's going to make more mistakes ultimately, and I think Indiana's ability to make tight throws against man coverage early. So I think when Miami's having success stopping the run, Mendoza's going to turn to Surratt. He's going to turn to Becker. He's going to turn to Cooper. And we've seen he's so accurate. Those guys get open and catch the football. They don't drop anything. I think that's going to be a big difference early in the game. And then I think him being black and the running game for Indiana will get going. I think Carson Beck will be forced into being much more of a factor and having to put the game on his back because of that. Because, they either get behind or they start to press because they're behind. And I think that's a recipe for Indiana to win. And guys, this is very similar to me to the Oregon game last week. And I said it when I picked that game. I think there's a specific way in route and recipe for this game to play out for Miami to win. I think they have to get a lead. I think they have to play clean. I think they have to commit to the run and give Fletcher and Brown their carries and just stay with it. And I think they can easily win this game if they do those things. But I think you look at Indiana can win. We said it last week. They can win 13-10. They can win 56-22. They can win 38-3. They can win 27-24. They can win 20-15. I think they can win any kind of game that can be played out. I think they can win a game where they turn it over. I think they can win a game where they're penalized. I think they can win a game where Mendoza throws it 40. I think they can win a game where Mendoza throws it 20. They're so complete and they execute at such a high level that I feel like they can overcome a lot. And we really haven't seen them face much adversity and have to overcome a lot because they just put a whipping on everybody they play. And so for those reasons, I think it's likely that Miami has some struggles in terms of trying to keep their operation clean and not turn it over and not get penalties. And I think that'll be the difference in the game, right? I think that Indiana's ability to take over the game and take advantage of those opportunities will win out. So, guys, I think it's going to be a heck of a game. Once again, Miami playing the national championship in their home stadium for the first time. They've been back to this point in 23 years. I think Indiana, have a chance to crown this season. It's just been magic, man. Like, you don't have very many of these come along, especially for a program like Indiana, and they have a chance to, put a major exclamation point on this thing and win it all and go 16-0. And on the flip side, Miami has a ton. Guys, it's the national championship. You don't need any motivation, right? But Miami has a chance to put behind it, this period of mediocrity they've been in for more than 2 decades. And win their 6th national championship since 1984, right? I mean, that's a tremendous run if you think about it, over 40, just a little over 40 years to win that many and do it with so many different coaches and so many different kind of eras of college football. It's definitely a game for, recent historians or amateur historians of the sport of Miami coming back. And I want to say the U is back, right? There's been a lot made of that with Mario Cristobal lately. And I think he's, this is his program and he's put it out there, and, they built it in their own vision, and it's not from the past, right? It's the present and the future for Miami, and that's the thing he really wants to drive home by winning this game, right? And I think Cignetti can, obviously cement his place in the sport, man. Like, you win a national championship at a place like Indiana. I know it's only year 2 there for him, but like, you're a college football Hall of Famer. I think there's no doubt about that, and you're going to go down as, obviously a very accomplished and legendary coach in the sport. And, the argument could be made. I mean, he could be the best in the sport right now, right? Like, I think some people would argue with his sample size not being large enough, but if you just look at the results on the field and what they've done there, it's hard to argue against it in the present and what's going on right now. So guys, that's it for our championship breakdown. Obviously, we'll kind of wait and see and watch the lead up to this thing on Monday. Well, the plan is to have a live reaction show as soon as the game goes final on Monday night right here on our YouTube channel. And, look for also, guys, once again on YouTube and TikTok and Twitter over the weekend. It's possible that we put out some more, film analysis of these two teams as the game gets closer. So once again, guys, y'all make sure you hit that subscribe button on YouTube. Follow us on Apple or Spotify, wherever you get your podcast. Follow us at Joey Browning CFB on Twitter. Follow us at Joey Browning CFB on TikTok. Send us any feedback or emails at Joey Browning CFB. Just Joey Browning CFB at gmail.com. Once again, that'll kind of be the place to go for our feedback and questions and stuff like that for future shows. So, guys, y'all have a great weekend and enjoy the Natty.